Pahalgam, a terror attack, tragically leaving 26 people dead.
Yeah, and the reports suggest it was clearly an attempt to spark communal violence. Pakistan-backed groups were implicated.
Right. And, after something like that, our response is almost inevitable. India's answer came in the form of Operation SINDOOR. Today, we want to go beyond just the news flashes. We're really going to unpack Operation SINDOOR, looking at what it truly entailed.
And for that, we're relying on some pretty solid sources, right?
Exactly. We have the official Ministry of External Affairs transcript from a special Ministry of Defense briefing on May 10th, 2025, plus two other key documents.
One gives the strategic picture of Sindoor itself, and the other talks about India's growing self-reliance and security.
Which, as we'll see, is absolutely crucial to understanding this whole operation. Okay, so where do we begin? Pakistan's narrative seems like a good starting point.
Definitely. It's fascinating, actually. The MOD briefing highlights this immediate misinformation campaign that Pakistan launched. They weren't just reacting. They were actively trying to shape the story.
How so? What were they claiming?
Well, for instance, they put out claims that their JF-17 fighters had managed to damage India's S-400 air defense system.
The S-400, that's a top-tier long-range system. A big claim.
Huge. And also that they'd hit a BrahMos missile base.
Yeah.
The supersonic cruise missile. These weren't minor assets they were talking about.
Significant claims indeed. And critically, according to the Indian MOD, completely false. But they didn't just stop there, did they?
No. The list went on. They alleged damage to a whole string of Indian airfields. Sirsa, Jammu, Pathankot, Bathinda, Nalia, Bhuj.
Wow, that's a lot of key locations.
It is. But the MOD briefing was very clear. All assets were fit and fine. They even showed photographs during the morning briefing as proof.
Okay, so direct rebuttal with evidence. What else was part of this misinformation?
They also claimed damage to ammunition dumps in Chandigarh and Bees. Again, India refuted these claims quickly and factually. But perhaps the most sensitive claim was the allegation that Indian forces had deliberately damaged mosques during their operations.
That's a really dangerous accusation designed to inflame passions. How did India respond to that?
The briefing strongly reiterated India's secular character and the military's respect for all places of worship. It emphasized that the operations were surgical, targeting only terrorist camps and related facilities. Absolutely no religious sites were hit.
So a clear line. Terrorists and their infrastructure were the targets, nothing else. Okay, so while this information war was heating up, what was India actually doing on the ground? The retaliatory strikes.
Right. Connecting back to the initial Pahalgam attack, India's response, Operation SINDOOR, was decisive. The MOD briefing and the other documents detail significant damage inflicted on Pakistan's military capabilities.
What kind of damage are we talking about?
We're talking substantial hits to their military infrastructure, both land and air assets. Specific airfields took damage. Skardu and Pojk, and then Jacobabad, Sargodha, and Bulari deep inside Pakistan.
And it went beyond just damaging runways or buildings, I guess.
Oh, yes. The briefing specifically mentions the neutralization of Pakistani air defense and radar systems.
Okay, for listeners maybe not familiar with the military jargon, what does neutralization mean in this context? What's the impact?
Well, think of radar and air defense as a country's eyes and shield against air attacks. Taking those out, even temporarily, severely degrades their ability to see what's coming and defend their airspace. It essentially blinds them, creating a window for offensive action.
That sounds like a major tactical advantage. And the impact wasn't just limited to your air capabilities, was it?
No, it wasn't. The briefing details extensive damage to Pakistan's command and control centers, basically the brains of their military operations. Plus, hits on logistics installations, the supply lines, and significant personnel losses near the line of control. The overall effect described was a serious crippling of both their ability to attack and defend, and naturally a major hit to morale.
And we have confirmation of specific targets, too.
Yes. That second document confirms retaliatory strikes, specifically on radar installations in Lahore and near Gujranwala. That really underscores the reach and precision involved.
Okay, so Pakistan was clearly feeling the pressure from these coordinated strikes. Is that what prompted the call for a ceasefire?
That's exactly how the briefing frames it. The sheer weight of the damage suffered led Pakistan's Director General of Military Operations, their DGMO, to initiate a call to his Indian counterpart.
And that led to an agreement?
Yes, an agreement for a ceasefire, which officially took effect at 5 p.m. Indian Standard Time on May 10, 2025.
But interestingly, the briefing notes that didn't quite mean a complete halt to hostile actions from Pakistan's side.
Right, and this is an important detail. Even after the ceasefire was formally agreed upon, Pakistan apparently continued attempts to intrude into Indian airspace using UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, and smaller drones.
So attempts were still being made. Were they successful?
No. The briefing states that Indian forces remained vigilant and successfully intercepted these post-ceasefire intrusion attempts.
Okay. So active defense continued even after the main hostilities stopped. But Operation SINDOOR, as you mentioned, wasn't just about military force. There were some very significant non-military steps taken by India.
Absolutely. And some of these carry enormous strategic weight. Let's start with the Indus Waters Treaty.
A decades-old treaty governing water sharing. What did India do?
India announced it was holding the treaty in abeyance, basically suspending its operation.
Suspending it? That's huge.
It is. And the condition given was clear. The suspension remains until Pakistan verifiably stops supporting cross-border terrorism. For Pakistan, the potential consequences are, frankly, catastrophic.
Why so catastrophic? Explain the reliance.
Well, Pakistan depends on the Indus River system for something like 80% of its irrigated farmland. And get this, 93% of its total water usage. That water supports 237 million people and underpins about a quarter of their GDP.
Those numbers are staggering. So, cutting off or restricting that flow.
Exactly. Especially with reports of their existing dam storage being low. It could trigger massive agricultural losses, food shortages, widespread water rationing, and potentially cripple industries reliant on that water. And this is hitting an economy already struggling with inflation and debt.
A very powerful lever. What about the benefit for India, aside from applying pressure?
On India's side, suspending the treaty gives it full control over the western rivers, like the Jhelum and Chenab. This opens the door for constructing new reservoirs in Jammu and Kashmir, Ladakh, Punjab, Haryana.
So potential gains in irrigation and hydroelectric power for India?
Precisely. Turning a constraint into an opportunity for domestic development. And the message attached was incredibly blunt. Blood and water cannot flow together.
Wow. Direct. Okay, what else on the non-military front? The border.
Yes. The Attari-Wagah border crossing, a major land route, was immediately closed. Bilateral trade was completely suspended.
Meaning no Indian exports going over, like onions, which are often mentioned.
Correct. And no imports coming in from Pakistan, things like cement, textiles. Again, more economic pressure on an already strained Pakistani economy. There was a deadline given for people with the right endorsements to return, but essentially that link was severed.
And diplomatic measures followed too?
They did. It was quite comprehensive. India revoked the visas of all Pakistani nationals who were in India at the time and deported them.
All of them?
That's what the briefing indicates. Plus, the Sark visa exemption scheme, which allows easier travel for certain categories, was suspended for Pakistani nationals.
So cutting off people-to-people contact as well.
And cultural contact, too. A ban was put on Pakistani artists and cultural exchanges within India, even extending to streaming platforms.
Right.
Diplomatically, the Pakistani defense, military, naval, and air advisors in New Delhi were declared persona non grata, basically kicked out.
A very strong diplomatic rebuke.
Yes, and the overall staff strength at the Pakistani High Commission was also significantly reduced.
It really paints a picture of a multi-front response, military, economic, diplomatic, cultural. Now, through all this, what was the role of the leadership? Prime Minister Modi was actually overseas during part of this, wasn't he?
He was, but the reports emphasize his decisive strategic direction throughout. What's highlighted is this interesting balanced strategic restraint on the one hand, meaning avoiding escalation, not hitting civilian targets, but combined with very assertive action focused specifically on the terror infrastructure. This created a kind of strategic unpredictability.
Making it harder for Pakistan to guess India's next move.
Exactly. And this focus, this precision targeting of terror camps while deliberately avoiding civilian areas, even drew praise from some opposition figures back in India, suggesting a degree of consensus on the approach.
And the overall messaging, how was this framed internationally?
The consistent message was that terrorism is a global threat, not just an India-Pakistan issue. This framing seemed to help garner international support for India's actions.
Right, and a key principle seems to have emerged from this.
A very important one, that India would no longer differentiate between the terrorists carrying out attacks and the state sponsors providing them with safe havens and support. They would be treated alike.
That's a significant shift.
It is. And despite provocations, the emphasis remained on avoiding harm to Pakistani civilians. The focus was laser-sharp on the terror networks. Another major policy declaration was that any future terror attack launched from Pakistan would be treated as an act of war.
Removing any ambiguity about state responsibility.
Precisely. eliminating that distinction between non-state actors and the state itself. In his address to the nation later, Prime Minister Modi called Operation SINDOOR a reflection of the people's feelings and a pledge for justice.
Did he lay out specific points regarding Pakistan and terrorism?
Yes. Several key takeaways from his address were highlighted. A fitting reply had been given. India wouldn't tolerate nuclear blackmail, strikes were precise against terror hideouts, no difference between the sponsoring government and terror masterminds.
And the lines about talks and water?
He reiterated those stark lines. Terror and talks cannot go together, trade and terror cannot go together, and blood and water cannot flow together. And he stated that any future talks with Pakistan would only be about two things: terrorism and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir.
Very clear red lines drawn. Okay,
Yeah.
so strong messaging, clear policy shifts. But let's talk concrete results. What did Operation SINDOOR actually achieve on the ground, according to the briefings?
The quantifiable impacts were significant. 9 major terrorist camps belonging to groups like Lashid, Jem, Hizbul Mujahideen were reported eliminated in Pakistan and Pojake.
And casualties.
Over 100 terrorists neutralized. India also demonstrated the capacity for deep cross-border strikes, hitting targets well inside Pakistan, including in Punjab province and near Bahawalpur.
So establishing a new strategic reach.
And a new strategic red line. Terrorism, as state policy, invites a forceful response directly against the sponsors, not just the proxies. It was about hitting the terrorists and their support system simultaneously.
You mentioned the air power aspect earlier. That seems like a major achievement highlighted.
Absolutely. The operation exposed serious weaknesses in Pakistan's air defenses, particularly the Chinese-supplied systems. The Indian Air Force, using Rafales, SKLP missiles, Hammer munitions, reportedly bypassed and jammed these systems in just 23 minutes.
23 minutes. That's incredibly fast.
It highlights a significant technological edge. Conversely, India's own multi-layered air defense, featuring systems like the indigenous Akash, proved highly effective, reportedly shooting down hundreds of incoming drones and missiles.
And this was done with precision, avoiding escalation.
That was a key point. Emphasized precision strikes that avoided civilian casualties and non-terror military targets, thereby managing escalation risks. Several high-profile terrorist commanders, some linked to past attacks like the IC-814 hijacking in Pulwama, were also eliminated.
And the scale of the air operation itself.
It was unprecedented in some ways. Reports mention strikes on 11 Pakistani air bases between May 9th and 10th. This apparently resulted in the destruction of about 20% of Pakistan's Air Force assets.
20%. That's a massive blow.
A huge blow, yes. With significant casualties reported at some bases, like Bulari, where a squadron leader was named among those killed. And it was a coordinated tri-service effort, Army, Navy, Air Force working together.
So the message sent wasn't just regional, but global.
Definitely. The message was clear. India will defend itself, it doesn't need permission, and terrorists have nowhere to hide. This seemed to resonate internationally, leading to widespread support, a shift from the usual calls for restraint we might have seen in the past.
And it reframed the Kashmir issue.
Yes, the narrative was firmly shifted towards counterterrorism, stripping away some of the political layers Pakistan often tries to impose.
The technological aspect keeps coming up. It feels like Operation SINDOOR was also a showcase for India's indigenous capabilities.
Very much so. It was a powerful demonstration of India's growing Atmanirbharta, or self-reliance, in critical defense tech. We saw the integration of homegrown systems in drone warfare, layered air defense, electronic warfare.
Can you give some specific examples from the operation?
Sure. On May 7th and 8th, when Pakistan launched drone and missile attacks towards Indian military sites like Awantapura, Srinagar,
Field held strong.
it did. And offensively, India targeted Pakistani air defense radars, including those near Lahore, showing an ability to penetrate and degrade their defenses.
You mentioned the Akash system earlier. How did India's own AD systems perform overall?
The reports highlighted the synergy between proven legacy systems and newer indigenous ones like Akash. Akash, for instance, can track and engage multiple targets at once and has features to counter enemy jamming attempts. It's mobile, too.
So a mix of old and new working together.
Exactly. Army, Navy, Air Force assets all integrated. The IAF's own Integrated Air Command and Control System, IECCS, was crucial for coordinating this complex network-centric battle. It created what was described as an impenetrable wall.
And on the offense side, beyond the aircraft.
We saw the use of loitering munitions, essentially smart drones that can wait for the right moment to strike. These were used with surgical precision against high-value targets like radar installations and missile systems at Pakistani air bases, apparently without any loss of Indian assets.
And again, that 23-minute figure for bypassing their defenses?
Yes, that keeps coming up as a key indicator of the technological gap, especially concerning Pakistan's reliance on Chinese systems.
Was there physical evidence recovered of the threats India faced?
There was. The briefings mentioned debris from Chinese PL-15 air-to-air missiles, Turkish Yiha UAVs, long-range rockets, quadcopters, even weaponized commercial drones. A real mix of threats.
So the DGMO, LT Gen Guy, commented on the performance of Indian systems.
He did. He highlighted the excellent performance of this mix. Counter-UAS systems, electronic warfare assets, air defense weapons from both Army and Air Force working in concert. These layers successfully defended Indian airfields and logistics hubs during that critical May 9-10 period.
And space assets played a role, too.
Indeed. ISRO Chairman V. Narayan mentioned at least 10 satellites working around the clock for strategic surveillance, monitoring coastlines and the northern borders. Eyes in the sky, constantly watching.
It really seems the drone ecosystem in India is booming, tying into the self-reliance theme.
Absolutely. It's a major success story. The ban on imported drones post-2021 and the PLI scheme really lit a fire under the domestic industry.
You mentioned the Drone Federation of India.
Yes, DFI represents over 550 companies now, thousands of pilots. The goal is ambitious. Make India a global drone hub by 2030. Companies like Alpha Design, TASL, Paras Defense, IG Drones are doing cutting-edge work, often partnering with the military.
And the market size prediction?
Projected at $11 billion for the Indian drone market by 2030. That's over 12% of global share. It's a huge area of growth.
And this self-reliance drive extends beyond just drones, obviously.
Oh, far beyond. Look at defense exports, a record 24,000 crore in FY 2024-25. The target is 50,000 crore by 2029.
That's more than double.
Yes, with the long-term aim of being a top global exporter by 2047. This is all part of the Make in India push. Indigenous production is also at record levels, over 1.27 lakh crore. Exports have apparently increased 34-fold since 2013-14.
What's driving that huge increase?
It's a combination of factors. Government reforms encouraging private sector participation, a real focus on R&D, leading to advanced platforms developed in India. Like the Dhanush and ATAGS artillery guns, the Tejas fighter jet, the Akash missile system we discussed, numerous naval ships and submarines. The government is backing this with procurement contracts, initiatives like IDEX for renovation, SRIGIN for indigenizing components, and setting up dedicated defense industrial corridors.
And we're seeing major acquisitions of these indigenous systems.
Definitely. Things like the LCH Prey-Chan attack helicopter, the ATJS guns, these are being inducted in significant numbers, showing real commitment to using homegrown tech.
Okay, so taking that step back again, looking at the whole picture, military, diplomatic, economic, technological, what's the final word on Operation Sindoor's significance?
Look, Operation Sindoor wasn't just a military counterpunch. It was really a multidimensional statement, an assertion of India's sovereignty, its resolve against terror.
A paradigm shift, perhaps.
You could call it that. Under Prime Minister Modi's leadership, it seemed to demonstrate a new strategic posture blending restraint, as we discussed, with undeniable strength, precision with purpose. The message couldn't be clearer. Terrorism, sponsored or otherwise, will face a swift, strong, and proportionate response. Period.
So wrapping this up, Operation Sindoor stands out as this decisive answer to a major terror attack. It showed strategic clarity, remarkable advancements in India's own defense technology, and a willingness to use multiple levers, military, diplomatic, economic, in a coordinated way.
Exactly. And maybe this deep dive leaves us and you, the listener, with something to think about. Consider how this operation, this very visible demonstration of military capability, combined with that strong push for self-reliance, might actually reshape the geopolitics of the region, maybe even beyond.
What are the long-term ripples, right, of this more assertive stance, this proven tech, this focus on making India for defense, something to definitely keep an eye on?